I always know that fall is approaching or fall has been reached when I just have the overwhelming desire to dress like a vampire at all times. And not just like a cool vampire trendy, but I'm talking like just like think really old school cliche Dracula, red lipstick, purple eyeshadow, the whole thing. So I for one am thrilled with my cliche look this week, and we are live here to chat about Supergirl and Stargirl and Only Murders in the Building and What If, which I actually haven't watched yet, but I'm going to let Kate spoil it for me anyways, and some other stuff this week. So, and also, I have a Cammie confession. Cammie is a liar slash disorganized, but we'll get to that at the end of this episode. Kate, how are you? How has your week been? And do we have any news for this week?
I'm good. The week's been pretty good. We do have a couple things for the news. So, because I'm a one track minded kind of person, WandaVision in the pre-Emmys, I guess you could say, has won a couple Emmys already. So that's exciting, and they better win some of the big name Emmys. I really was excited to hear about that. The Hawkeye trailer released a few days ago. So in November, see me and Cammie just continue on our predictable streak where we talk about the women in Marvel that is bringing it up by its bootstraps.
Yes.
And a little bit of it.
Okay, you can't hear you. Is it just me? Let us see. I think she is frozen. The last thing I heard Kate say was that she and I are becoming predictably Marvel women apologists, and it's so unfortunate because we were DC once upon a time. Kate, I see you moving again. You might have gotten unfrozen. The last thing that we heard you say was that you and I are turning into Marvel apologists, and apparently that caused all technology to fail. So pick up from there.
Yes, it freaked out at this revelation.
Yes.
And after that, I mentioned that there's a there is a new movie called Kate. I haven't watched it yet, but it looks like a John Wick style action movie. And I thought I'd just mention.
That sounds awesome. And I apologize this week, as always. There's a bit of a delay. So between that and the technical glitchy issues, you'll just have to bear with us. But I'm very excited for what we're going to be chatting about this week. So one of the things that I wanted to get into that I realized when I made it kind of the thumbnail, the really high quality thumbnails that I make every week, guys. I made Supergirl kind of the headliner thumbnail this week because we got an awesome storyline, only one. One of the many Supergirl storylines this week was good. The rest were mediocre at best, if I'm being honest. But we got a storyline where Lena Luthor goes to find her biological mom and discovers her biological mom was a witch in a coven. There's this whole like backstory and intrigue and interest to it that you can kind of get the sense of just from the thumbnail alone. And it was just so fabulous. But Kate, one of the things that stood out to me, for better for worse, was I really felt like I was watching two different shows on Supergirl this week. We would go from an episode where this obviously beautiful, talented, complex, anti-heroine type of character was on a mission to go find some stuff out about her mom, who was obviously a bit of a complex character herself. And she is, kind of in this like small town dealing with like small town rumors and all this sort of stuff. It's just so interesting. Like I would watch an entire show about that, hands down. And then we would cut to scenes with the rest of the team. And I'm sorry, through no fault of their own, it just felt like I had switched the channel to a complete, it wasn't even just that it was a different show, it was a whole different quality of show. And I know you don't watch Supergirl, but from an outsider's perspective, do you, as like a listener, you have your ear to the ground when it comes to like DC stuff. Are you even hearing about good quality stuff going on Supergirl, or do you mostly hear about the fact that it's cheesy and ending?
So I watched the first couple of seasons of Supergirl. I quit watching when it got a little too preachy and I felt like the quality dropped off. And I was watching a lot of the other CW shows at the time, and I just had to kind of pick my battles. So I've always had an issue with the DC Arrowverse shows. Even Arrow had several moments of, is this really what you guys are going to put out? I think when we watch like Superman Lois, it's kind of this diamond in the rough. Like it's such a surprise that it's such a high quality show, both cinematically and writing and acting, all that stuff. And on that level, I think part of it always comes down to the dedication that they have to a character storyline in the CW writing staffs. I felt like we always kind of got much better storylines for Felicity and Oliver and their remnants, and most of the time OTA, with a few exceptions, of course, but I felt like the writers cared more about those characters, so their stories were better, and the characters they didn't care about got really crappy stories. Mm-hmm. And I think that might be the case for a lot of the other shows. And from what I can tell, I would say that's probably accurate with Supergirl, is I've always thought that Lena Luthor had probably some of the best storytelling. Mm-hmm. And that's not necessarily to say that they couldn't do great things or the writing wasn't really great with Supergirl, but I think they have the same problem in Supergirl that they occasionally have with the Flash, and can also often be part of the problem in a Superman or Superwoman or Supergirl show, is that they've made them out to be too much of the pinnacle and they can't make any mistakes. So having Luthor be morally gray, but like trying to do what's right and having a more complex and developing story lends both more to better writing and more interest in the character. So I've always felt like her storylines were the most well written and most thought out, and her interactions with Kara, whether I liked them or not, or whether I thought they should have happened much earlier or anything like that, I think they were done with a little bit more tact and grace. Whereas everything else is kind of just like, hey, we're at the other campy show that teaches you to be good to other people. Cool.
Right. I think that when Lena has scenes with any of the other characters, it elevates them quite a lot. There's a scene in this episode where she has a phone conversation with a character named Andrea, who I like, but I don't really care about. She's quite a side character. And that phone conversation was just it was interesting. It was a nice little, break from the more intense action that was going on in the village when she was finding out all this stuff about her family lineage, being a witch, etc. And it really elevated a character that otherwise extremely forgettable to me. Likewise, she had the opportunity to kind of play a part in some flashbacks, which was like super, super flashbacks to when the witch coven was a thing, which was really cool. And there was one line which I thought was really fun. She is initially pretty resistant, or not resistant, but she doesn't really believe that her mother was involved in a coven or witchcraft or whatever. And one of the characters is like, I've seen you arm in arm with a, bulletproof alien. Why don't you believe in witches or whatever? Just the way that the whole dynamic was, and kind of exploring the limits of what she believed in, was really interesting. But also, that was a cool call out to the fact that like Lena Luthor is well known, like makes news and tabloids and stuff, and is frequently associated with Supergirl. I found that really fun. I found it illuminating about her character. And I know I'm a predictable broken record, but if she was a guy, it would be very shippy for her and Supergirl. But because the fan base is homophobic or just has their preferences or whatever, who's to say, then they like Kara with Monel, who is terrible and is actually a villain.
When I saw Monel, I could tell that her, like the actress and the actor had chemistry. I mean,
Yeah.
obviously, because they're married now, but I was kind of like indifferent to, like, I was like, I guess she's happy. Okay, this is fine. But I didn't love his character, and I was like, And then I kind of actually liked it better when she wasn't in a romance. And then, but I kind of have to agree. I think there's the most obvious romance of all, and they just won't do it.
Yeah. And you know me, like I love a good, hero villain romance. So I have a tendency towards that. I love to see, the sort of light and dark romances. We can get into the shadow and bone aspect. Like I like it there too when he's a full-blown villain and completely not comparable to Lena Luthor, who's like a saint in comparison, whatever. But anyways, that's why I wanted sentence trails off as I stare wistfully in the distance thinking about Lena Luthor. That's why I wanted to start the episode by talking a little bit about Supergirl, and also that way we can transition into Stargirl. The two are, they're not even in the same universe, but they are airing back to back right now. They're paired on sort of this like girl power superhero night, which I know is kind of cheesy, but I actually find it really cute, and I've really been enjoying Stargirl. You haven't watched Stargirl at all yet, right?
No, I haven't watched it.
Okay. So in the description below, you can see I've linked a podcast I was on last week with Mr. Martin the Flash and X-Force 11 Jeff, where they've been reviewing Stargirl every week, which is really exciting. And I stepped in for just a second this week I wouldn't say fill the shoes of, I could never do that, but very temporarily replace Miss Harley Jess. And I infiltrated their headquarters and chatted about Stargirl. And as such, it was very much in the forefront of my mind this week. And I really enjoyed this week's episode because a couple things we had, I won't say complained about, because I actually have a pretty soft heart when it comes to this show, uncharacteristically, but a couple things that we had said we wanted to happen did happen. And one of them is, I know, I saw that face, Kate. One of them is we actually got to see her mom doing something in this episode because her stepdad was gone. Let me tell you, Kate, I'm so, you know how like I'm always annoyed at male characters. That's a given. But you know how there's like this very specific male character type that drives me up the wall, and it's sort of this like thinks he's funny but isn't funny, extremely incapable and inconsiderate and emotionally
Modern Family.
Yes, Phil from Modern Family. And frequently those characters are like everybody's favorite. Like literally it's been years since Modern Family and I still see people being like Phil was the feminist we all deserved. And I'm like anyways, but that's why I liked, for example, the show Kevin Can F Himself, right? Because it kind of deconstructs the narrative around like the really, truly terrible sitcom dad. So on Stargirl, her stepdad dabbles in being that character. He's not the worst of the worst, don't get me wrong. And the reason why he's not the worst of the worst is because they do not make her stepmom be that stereotypical, like, uptight, fun killer. I'm here to basically be the mommy of this guy, right? We all know the type. We all know the, like, fun killer sitcom mom. Her mom is not like that at all. Her mom, she is a businesswoman. She is, less of the aw shucksy type of character as compared to the stepdad. But from what we can see of her interacting with Courtney and her stepbrother Mike, her mom actually is like a good mom. But we don't get to see her be a mom sometimes because they are too busy building up the relationship, like the father-daughter relationship between Courtney and her stepdad, who I don't even care about, and he should be lucky that I don't hate him. You know what I mean? Like, he's on thin ice at all times. In this episode, we actually got to see her mom be her mom because her stepdad was kidnapped. And I'm like, if that's what it takes, perhaps he can be kidnapped for a season or something. But I was thrilled about that. And we got to see the villainess, her evil, counterpart, someone who's very obviously like 35 years old, but is supposed to be playing like a high school girl with superpowers, who's bad though. We got to see her go after Courtney's little brother because that's who she's trying to recruit onto her team, which is another thing I was looking more towards, is not seeing her little brother. They had previously almost hinted at him, getting sort of superpowers of his own. And I was like, no, can we not? So he may be somewhat temporarily. We'll see, slightly aiding the bad guy team. So I really appreciated those two things. Now, here's my question for you, Kate. What do I have to do to get you to watch this show?
Supply me with more time in my life. I don't know.
It meant time travel.
It meant time travel.
That's
create my own like infinite loop that I can just pop it into and then pop out of when I've caught up on my TV.
And like only 2 seconds passed, Narnia style.
Yes, exactly. Narnia style, exactly.
That sounds fabulous.
Yes, the pleasant version of time travel, please.
Yes. That doesn't have a ripple effect.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, that's super fair. So that transitions well into oh, sorry, go ahead. What'd you say?
I just made a joke of thank you, C.S. Lewis, but yeah, transition into what if seamlessly, please.
Let's check the chat real quick. Actually, I see Carrie says he's late to the party, but he's here. Also, is he the only one caught flat-footed with the Magic Lena storyline? Did they forecast this at all? Carrie, that's a good question. And actually, Kate may be a good one to answer this because you did only see the early seasons. Kate, did you get the sense that there could be more going on with Lena's storyline other than just being a Luthor? Did you get the sense of potential witchy powers ever hinted at with her?
I mean, I completely forgot that she was adopted, so I'm maybe not the best reference. I kind of did forget a lot about that show already. I do remember though that she had this, I guess, aura about her that she was simultaneously always amazed and like surprised by the mystical or supernatural things that happened around her. But then she was very adaptive. She like once the shock had subsided, she's like, okay, down to business. Let's get this done. So I guess on that level, I could see her doing well in her own supernatural style storyline. But I don't really remember anything else other than the fact that she has witchy vibes just in her appearance. So
Yeah.
that's it.
She definitely has witchy vibes in her appearance. It is what I'm always trying to poorly copy at all times. But I think there's been moments where they may have hinted at her, just the way like CW can sort of hint at things. They may have hinted at there being a little bit more to her in terms of intuition or maybe magical vibes just in general. But I do think this came only in the most recent season where they are dabbling in magic and they do have the imps and so on. But I think it's fun. I think it's fitting for Lena and it certainly fits her character. But I'm also incredibly biased. I'm such a Lena apologist. She could do anything and I'd be like, if it's her character, she's a good person. Have you looked at her? Like, she's obviously a good person. Ken from Chicago. It sounds like he's shocked that I had a soft heart even for season 1 of Stargirl. And he says, how poor heroes are with securing their bases. That's true. He is also shocked that I dislike the character Phil from Modern Family. Listen, I will die on this hill and have done so many times. I do not subscribe to Phil positivity. I think he is the perfect example of a truly terrible male character who occasionally does the bare minimum, but does not do so more often than not, and gets away with it due to the goodness of the people around him and people being overly forgiving of a man who executes a couple jokes per episode, and frankly, none of them are good. Ken from Chicago says that Maureen Ryan, who I believe is from who was she writing for right now? She does a lot of really good, like, kind of investigative TV journalism, if that makes sense, or investigative entertainment journalism, calls that character, the one that we were referencing, of the kind of overly harsh sitcom mom that's very obviously written by a man who hates his ex-wife. She calls that character, quote, she who says no, which I think is interesting. And Carrie says, this point means nothing, but I was today years old when I found out Katie McGrath's last name is pronounced McGraw with a soft A. Interesting. I did not know that either.
I bet that's because she's Irish.
Oh, yeah. Ken from Chicago says Lena's college-age best friend Andrea had magical powers. Who's currently running Catco. That was kind of that side character I said I didn't really care about. And Lena almost found the magical artifact that gave Andrea powers. That's true. Like, the show has dabbled in magical artifacts, but I believe this is the first time they've dabbled more in this idea of like covens and witches, with one of the main characters having the lineage of a witch. It was just very interesting. And as somebody like with a one-track mind who enjoyed, the whole mythology behind Scarlet Witch, it certainly appealed to me at this moment.
Well, and my guess also isn't this the last season of Supergirl?
This is the last season of Supergirl.
I bet they're trying to set these roots for her in case they can get Katie McGraw, now I know, to maybe hop on to other TV shows like David Ramsey's doing and keep her around. Also, it just hit me. She used to play Guinevere,
Yes.
I think.
Morgana?
No, Morgana. She used to play Morgana in King Arthur. Or, no, it wasn't King Arthur. I don't know. She used to play Lady Morgana, which is magical. So there's also a little bit of like a tongue-in-cheek reference there.
Yeah, absolutely. Ken says Mo Ryan used to write for Chicago Tribune, moved on to other news sites. Yeah, she writes for something. She writes for a major site. I don't know if it was Entertainment Week. She writes for something big. Ken also adds, ever since Crisis changed the timeline, all bets are off on any history before last season. That is a good point when it comes to the history of Lena Luthor and sort of the setup where there's kind of automatic plot forgiveness if they don't overuse it and they use it for good. They can now kind of go back and plot fix some things that they need to do. I would like to request that they go back and put Lena and Kara together, but nobody asked me. Okay, Kate, you mentioned you need more time. So tell me, you need more time in your day to catch up with all television, to read all books, and to also be, the STEM Wonder Woman that you are in real life. The non-specific STEM Wonder Woman that you are. So tell me, what have you watched or read this week?
Okay. So this morning I watched both the new episode of What If and the new episode of Only Murders in the Building. So to kind of go along with the time travel theme, we can start with What If. So What If, this episode is kind of an episode that neither of us would typically gravitate towards, maybe because it focuses around Tony Stark. Don't hate Tony Stark, he's just there where he's, yeah. But it kind of takes this whole idea of he turns good, for lack of a better term, after experiencing the horrors of his own making through his time in Afghanistan. Whereas in this interpretation, he is quickly saved by Killmonger. They get out, and Killmonger basically becomes his second hand. He never becomes Iron Man. He actually makes one of the robots that is in one of the other Iron Man movies, I believe. And that kind of goes awry. Basically, it takes Killmonger and makes him an even more intricate character, because even in Black Panther, he was kind of really good at social manipulation. He's very charismatic. He made you want to trust him because of his very appealing personality, and he could fool a lot of people by doing that. And then this episode of What If takes that and just goes exponentially with it, to the point that the only characters that have any ability to question anything, Happy and Rhodey, kind of do it a little bit, but the two people that actually question anything is Pepper and Shuri, because of course they are. And I think this episode, more than any of them, definitely hints at, I think the final half of this first season of What If is going to start combining things, because you definitely get to see the Watcher kind of more in the story narrating. He didn't interfere anymore, but you could actually see him more directly talking to camera, explaining what this means. It also was much more open-ended, of like, Shuri shows up at Stark Industries telling Pepper, hey, we have to team up to show everybody who this guy really is to stop him. And it very much had the cliffhanger energy of to be continued, without actually saying that. So I think this is one of those storylines that they're going to use later, either in this season or maybe carry it out into next season. But these storylines and these what if scenarios are becoming more and more specific, and this one really did a great job at highlighting something I've mentioned before. I don't know if I've mentioned it here, but I've mentioned it before, that Marvel is taking a very direct approach of starting to explore the theme of good and evil in a very much more nuanced way than they used to. Questioning how characters that we normally take as being good guys, and saying, okay, well, what if this never happened to them? What if they never were forced to change their ways? What if they just kind of continued on with life? And that's what they did with Tony in this episode. And it's a continuation of my defense of Wanda, and I will die on this.
This is where I was hoping we would get. Continue.
Last time I said that it was because it was in defense of basically saying like Doctor Strange had a questionable morality in his episode of What If, and he did worse things than Wanda. And hey, guess what? He's not infallible. He's not the savior that's going to come and fix everything. Same with like Wanda. Even though I defend her, I can understand she made mistakes, and if we didn't understand her intentions, you could define the outcome as somewhat villainous. And so I think they're going to really start to explore that in greater detail in the next coming movies.
That sounds fantastic. I can't wait to watch it. I want to add Carrie's commentary from the chat. Ken, first of all, says What If is a great anthology series. I love that he used the word anthology, and I want to come back to that because I know that it is an anthology, but I wonder if it's becoming Arrow Voice something
But
else.
is
it? Yeah. So I want to hear Kate's thoughts on that. But then I also want to add what Carrie said. He mentioned the voice actor for Tony Stark is a guy who voiced Iron Man in other shows, but his lighter voice actually was critical here because this Tony didn't have the weight or gravity of being a hero or an Avenger. So what are your thoughts on both of those things?
So what Carrie said, I actually did catch myself. So in the first episode that had Tony, I noticed that it was a different voice actor far more often. He was saying more of the same lines he said he was Tony, like was Iron Man. And there was a bit of like hokiness in the delivery. But in this episode, I didn't notice it until the very end. There's a fight sequence where he's not really fighting, but it is, spoiler, where he dies in this episode. Mm-hmm. And it wasn't until then that I realized, oh, this is a different, like I realized that it was a different voice actor. Because it was such a different story and it was basically an entirely different character, I hadn't really thought about it. Whereas the last time he voiced it in this series, it was very apparent to the point of it almost bothering me. But it was nobody else's fault, so I didn't really bring it up. They couldn't get Robert Downey Jr. to do the voice acting. And then with the anthology, it is for now. It is for now. It kind of, to me, feels like they're heading in a direction where, I can't think of anybody at the top of my head right now, but there's authors that churn out books like this. And technically they're in a series, and technically they have the same characters that have interweaving plot lines, but technically they're written so you can read them, like read any one and hopefully get it. That's kind of what I think this is going to turn into, where it's technically they're all interwoven, but you could also just watch an episode and pretty much get that, hey, this is just a what if spin-off, crazy things have happened. This is not our movie universe, this is something else. Mm-hmm. But we're taking the stories that we told you in the main universe and twisting them on their head. That's the impression I get, and it's still going to kind of take that whole concept that I mentioned before about the Watcher is basically kind of telling us that, hey, we're going to start doing some multiverse hopping. This is your first taste at realizing you might see a face. Mm-hmm. It might look very similar to you, but it's not technically the same character. This is a different universe, different story, and that also kind of lends itself to that whole question of morality of if you're the same person, but you experience slightly different lives, how does that change your perspective of morality? Does it affect you significantly? Do you become good and evil? Like, how does that unravel? Small events to big events, things like that. And I think they're going to start trying to slowly address all those different things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it's getting to a really interesting place, as we were talking about this last week as well, with this kind of fun, quote unquote, zombies episode that really, pushed forward the discussion of morality here. And it sounds like this week's episode does as well. I'm very interested to watch it. I will be keeping Carrie's comment in mind regarding the alternate voice actor actually being a good choice here. Ken agreed as well. He said it kind of was just like how Tony Stark was a billionaire who didn't take much seriously before being Iron Man. It seemed to highlight that. And he also adds he agrees with what you're seeing, what you're saying, Kate. That What If has been setting up stories that they can return back to and continue. He says, I think the What If comic series sometimes continued stories from a previous issue. Okay, that's interesting. So it's kind
I
of their.
mentioned that at the Dragon Con panel.
Yeah. I'm unfamiliar with those, so that is completely new to me. But I'm unfamiliar with most of the comic book
I've never read
material.
comics either.
Yeah. Particularly Marvel. I've dabbled in a few DC
Mm-hmm.
comics, I will admit. Okay. Well, Kate, I want to make sure we have time to talk about Only Murders in the Building because I just watched episodes 4 and 5 back to back this afternoon/evening. And I have some thoughts. I think you've got some thoughts. I know we were pretty excited to chat about it last week as well, at which point both of us, I think, had just kind of made our way into the first few episodes. So let me start with a question for you. You know how you and I have kind of loosely defined a category of show that lends itself well to theorizing or theories. Do you feel
Mm-hmm.
this is that kind of show?
It might not be intended to be that way, but I have made it that way.
Gotcha.
I have a theory. I think I know who did it. I think I've got to this point of I think I know who did it sometime in my like first 4 episode binge that I did last week.
Yes.
Um, do you have a theory right as of yet?
I have a few.
Okay.
They're not going to be as well fleshed out as yours. So, one of my theories, and I know this is going to sound crazy and a little bit far fetched and possibly jumping the shark, but for some reason, it really sounded right to me by, I would say, the middle of the 5th episode. Okay. So, you know the girl who was a part of their group who was not Mabel, the blonde girl. I
Yes.
forgot
I
her.
don't remember her name, but yeah,
She's the one that
the girl who
committed.
died.
Yeah, she died, was pushed, etc., whatever. It occurred to me, what if she's not actually dead and all of that was staged?
I thought that.
There were certain elements of the way that she was stylized that just made me wonder if it was possible that they styled somebody else to look like her and it was actually her faking her death for some reason and they killed somebody else. So, whatever, I don't know. So I was wondering about that because I just for some reason get this sense that the 4 of them, it can't be that one of them's already dead. I feel like we at some point in the series are going to see that group reunited, and to have the quote unquote group reunited, we have to have at least 3 of them alive. Something about it plot
Yeah.
wise, having 2 members of a 4-person group die before we ever really see the group reunite, quote unquote, present day, felt odd. And I just get the sense that somebody's still alive. I don't know how to explain it. It's not a fully fleshed out theory. But because of that, I then wondered if it would be the girl, or I wonder if it would be a woman in general, because the way in which he was killed, gun to the head, is not typically what we pin as a female-led crime. And I wonder if that's trying to lead us down a different path. So I'm like, okay, what other women are there in the building? You know, who had something against him? Does he have an ex? He was involved in this whole jewelry thing. Is there a woman involved in that? So I'm wondering if it was a female executed crime. But those are my two theories thus far. I've dabbled in some others, but that's where I'll stop for now. Your turn.
So I very early came to the theory that at least who killed Tim and possibly who killed the other girl are the same person.
Okay.
They are not Oscar.
You just froze, and I'm on the edge of my seat. You cannot freeze there, Kate. I want to know what your theories are. Also, Carrie and Ken and anybody else in the chat who's watching, are you watching Only Murders in the Building? And if you are not, why not? Love yourself. It is the comedy mystery of your dreams. Kate, I see you moving again. You were frozen there for a second, and where you froze was when you said that you don't think it's Oscar.
I think, it's Oscar's dad.
Oh, okay. Okay.
So I knew they were going to go down this route of suspecting Mabel. It was very clear, very obvious early on that they were going to do that, which is a very clear indicator that it was not her. And even more bright shining lights that, hey, we're going to suspect Oscar. Hey, it wasn't him either. I think it was probably Oscar's dad. And at first, when I saw the jewelry thing, I was like, dang it, that kind of pushes that one out the window. But the more I thought about it, the less that actually is true. There's possibilities that he did not like the other girl. I remember that the other girl was a rich girl. Her family had money, had connections, things like that. And Oscar's dad is actually like the maintenance guy. There could have been some frustration about her parents like using him, doing him wrong. He tried to get back. My guess is actually probably he didn't mean to push her, and it got hostile in a confrontation, and then she accidentally fell. And maybe 15 or 10 years ago, his dad looked more like Oscar, looked 10 years younger, still looked kind of like a younger guy, and could have possibly in the shadows been mistaken for Oscar. And then Oscar gets blamed, sent to jail, and then with Tim doing the investigation, what might have also been happening is she makes that connection with the jewelry store, and I can't remember the exact details, but there is some connection still with her cousin and the jewelry store that Oscar brings up in the most recent episode. And there might be some aspect of Oscar's dad being involved with that too, hiding his tracks from his mistake 10 years ago. And then Tim is continually trying to track this down, and Oscar's dad finally finds out that, hey, he's got all the evidence he needs to put me in jail. And Oscar's father kills Tim.
That is a really good theory. And it makes sense, particularly with the idea of him being mistaken for Oscar. I had not put that together, but that does make a lot of sense. Carrie has a theory he's put in the chat, or at least it's a question. He says, did you guys watch Murder on the Orient? I did. I am a very big Agatha Christie fan. He says, is it possible to have a similar scenario regarding these suspects? So sort of an everybody either intentionally or unintentionally participated in the series of events that eventually killed him, for those unaware. And he mentions he's not watching because he doesn't have Hulu. Let me tell you, Hulu is absolutely terrible, and I fully support your decision to not have it. It is easily one of my least favorite streaming services. The app is terrible. It doesn't support picture in picture on all devices and is just quite difficult to navigate. And their method of charging and still having commercials, obviously, I just think is kind of it's a cash grab. And in general, while they have a couple good shows, it is simply not a deep enough library to support it as like a valuable streaming service. And I think that the only reason that Hulu is up there sort of in the same discussion as a service like Netflix or something else like that is simply because they've been around a really long time, because they had the initial buy-in model where you would use it and it was free. I don't know if you know this, but originally Hulu simply was free. They had a couple commercials per episode. And this was like way back in the day, like when I was in college. Okay. So back when grandma was in college over here, you would have the episodes uploaded, usually within a couple hours of them airing. You had a lot of shows putting full seasons on there. It was free to have an account. You could bookmark everything, and they had a really good, at the time, a very good infrastructure for, favoriting shows and getting notifications when your shows had new episodes and that kind of stuff. And it would just have a couple commercials. They started adding more and more commercials, but I didn't really care because you can always turn on an ad blocker, and you still can because they have not changed their infrastructure since then. But you can always turn on an ad blocker or mute it or whatever, and you'll be fine. Like, suck it up. It's free. It was when they started charging for this service without having really evolved past the quality of a free service that it really bothered me. So all of that to say, I'm thrilled with this show. I really like some shows, not many, but I really like some shows on Hulu, but their business model needs a huge overhaul in order to have a positive opinion from me. Okay, so the Orient Express theory, Kate, what are your thoughts on that?
So yes, I have seen the Orient Express. I think it's a good question to have, and I will continue to watch maybe with that thought in mind. However, what we do know about his death and the scenes that we've, like, the more mystery we've seen about it, the Orient Express, it has more of a structure of, like, we have more details and mystery about exactly how he died. There's several possible, like, causes of death. There's suspicion more directly on who's, like, people's true alibis, and it's more of a, like, structure from that view. Whereas with this, it's almost more of, it's very much like a like they follow a couple suspects each episode. So there was obviously, like, the episode with the funeral, with the service, and they were kind of just interrogating all the other kind of nobodies in the building, that the people that you don't really need to know. But it was a story that kind of gave you more information about our three main characters instead through their associations with these other characters. I think it's less of a we all got to do it together. Maybe it's a two-man team, but I don't think it's going to be everybody in the building plotted to kill Tim. I think it's more of a, hey, covering my tracks, or two-man team, or something like that. There is hints of, like, black market stuff that's happening.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's less of like, hey, we all just did not like Tim, and more of a, there was already some, like, undercurrents of crime that they're covering up.
Yeah. Yeah, I'd have to agree with that. I don't think it was a coordinated effort to kill him. The context in which I had considered that it could be a coordinated effort to kill him would be if the remainder of the group, including if she was still alive in my far-fetched example, but even if it was just the two remaining, Mabel and Oscar, if the remainder of the group had coordinated to kill him, that was the context in which I considered it being a group job. And I couldn't make that make sense or be the most compelling plot choice. But I'm really excited to see where the show goes, and not just in the sense of solving the mystery, although there is certainly that as well. I'm interested in the ongoing comedic elements. I'm interested in the ongoing relationship elements. I'm interested very much in Mabel as a character herself. I hope this continues past this single season. I don't know if this is intended to be an event season only, and I haven't looked that up, to be honest.
I haven't either, and I'm very interested to find out. I think it's really well done so far. So I kind of like a kind of funny ring bit that why do people keep getting murdered in the building, and then everybody still lives there.
Yeah,
kind of like Riverdale. But yeah, that'd be fun.
I've been really pleased to see the positive reaction to the show. I know it's got really great ratings on Rotten Tomatoes. I've been seeing a lot of reviewers talk really positive about it. I saw a friend of mine on Twitter right before this mentioned that she thinks Selena Gomez is going to get a Golden Globe for her performance on this show. Well, maybe we should change that to an Emmy, but I echo the sentiment. I think we've reached the part of the show, Kate, where I have to confess what I did not confess at the top of the hour. Okay. Recall, I am in the middle of like 4, maybe 5 books right now, and an abbreviated list of some of the books that I am in the middle of. 1, book 2 from Shadow and Bone. But that's not my fault. Mal annoyed me into stopping. 2, The Word Exchange, which I'm genuinely really enjoying, but also it takes brain power to read. 3, a friend of mine sent me his book, and I have finished 5 of the 6 chapters. They're like long chapters, and then it's like a novelette type of situation. But I finished 5 of the 6 chapters because I don't want it to be over. And I believe I started book 5 of the Bridgerton series and then stopped because I didn't want to get too far ahead, and I wasn't really feeling the series at the time based on some of the, what I was hearing from season 2. But I'm starting to get excited about season 2 because they're starting to promo it again. And there's more that I'm not even listing. I decided it would be a good idea, rather than complete any of the things that I've started, I should start another book. Because I saw a TikTok that was recommending a whole bunch of enemies to lovers romances, and my hands were tied. I had no choice. I had to start one, naturally. So I picked one that sounded really interesting, and I am reading it on my phone, and that was part of the reason I started another book. Is one of the books that I listed, like I pretty much only read it on my desktop because I take notes at the same time for a friend of mine. One of them is a hard copy, so I only read it when I can have a hard copy safely in hand, and I wanted another one to have on my phone. So I was reading on my phone, which is important here because I didn't look at the cover when I started it. And as I was reading through it, there were these signs, there were these clues that should have told me that this is just going to be like which is totally fine if this is what you're into, no judgment from me. But there should have been the signs that this was just going to be like a steamy, like dime paperback novel type of thing. Like the signs were there. However, the TikTok that promoted it did not make it sound that way and included it in a list that had books that were definitely like not that type of book. Like included it in a list that had books that weren't even like inherently romances, much less steamy romances. And there were like signs that seemed to point to that, but just based on the framework of the plot, that essentially there was no sex in the first whole half of the book, like none at all, like no sex, pretty much no kiss. Like everything about the book seemed like it was that kind of book, but I'm like staying with it because I'm like, maybe it's not that kind of book. Anyways, and then it got there and I just like wasn't feeling it because that wasn't what I signed up for. Like, I'm not opposed to a steamy paperback, but that wasn't what I was trying to go for. So now I have yet another book that I've quit halfway through.
That's fair. I mean, I guess it's fair for me to also go ahead and tell you that the book I started last week, Dune, the 1,000-page book, I finished it. I finished
Wow.
reading Dune.
Did you
Was
like
great.
it?
I liked it. Yeah, it was good. Just in time. Well, not really just in time. I had a few weeks before it, but for that new movie to come out, and then fittingly, I suppose you could say, I there's an app called Libby, and you can actually rent ebooks and audiobooks from your local library system. So I had two other audiobooks on hold and they came up for me to borrow at the same time. So I started reading one of them yesterday. It's called The Midnight Library, and it actually also uses concepts of like time loops and stepping out of time
Oh,
and
nice.
using escaping time as a way of exploring your choices and um, how events of your life shape the person you become to be. And I was like, what? Is time travel and like taking things out of time and alternate realities is just something that keeps following me. And it's not like a sci-fi book. It is very much like it starts out very much like a day-to-day thing. It describes a girl who has a job very similar to mine, which I was like, it's creepy, like because it has very like sad, dark undertones with it. But the concept of to stepping out of time and like this sentient librarian being
Mm-hmm.
instructing you to look at all these different books as versions of your life that you could have. That's a really cool concept. So it's a really good book so far, and I think it was one of the New York Times bestsellers this year. Pretty
Oh, okay.
good. So when I finish that, I will let you know how it is. Maybe you can actually finish that one.
Yes. Maybe I will. Every book that I currently have going is good in some way. Even the steamy paperback, there's a time and a place. That's just it wasn't what I thought I had signed up for. The books that you're reading sound really excellent right now though, Kate. And I'm excited to hear how they go. And I hope that after you create time travel, you create a little time loop for yourself to catch up on some of these shows and books, while still being STEM Wonder Woman. And with that, that brings us to the top of the hour. We will see you guys again, same time, same place next week. Oh, but let me know. We were talking, and we'll be here same time, same place next week. Don't get me wrong, but we were loosely talking about the idea of potentially doing Twitter Spaces, and that has some downsides, some upsides. Downsides is it's audio only, not that you need to see my face anyways. But an upside is that we could have multiple speakers, so anybody joining could kind of like chat with us, and I thought that was kind of cool. So just something to keep in mind. Drop a comment if you think Twitter Spaces would be a good platform for this. For now, we're sticking with YouTube Live. I have tried every live stream thing you can possibly think of in like the last 5 years. I like them all, but I've come back to YouTube many times just because of, Papa Google has a chokehold on us.